Do you want to check out ITProTV but aren't ready to commit? We're making a few episodes from our most popular courses free for you to try here on YouTube so you can see what they're all about. Enjoy this episode and head over to ITPro.tv when you're ready to see the full course.
Hello and welcome to your Azure Fundamentals series. I'm your show host, Cherokee Boos. In this episode, we're going to be talking about high availability. And of course, with us today in studios, we have Mr. Mike Roderick to explain this topic. How's it going today, Mike?
Oh, it's going great, Cherokee. Thanks for having me. Excited as always to be here. And yeah, we're going to talk about what the heck this high availability is. And we hear it a lot, right? It seems like it's a big buzzword. And it's one of the big benefits of moving out to the cloud, as we're going to talk about in upcoming episodes. But at this point, when we talk about our fundamentals, we really need to make sure we understand just the concept of what the heck do they mean by high availability, right? And when it comes down to it, high availability is all about ensuring that a resource is available. Kind of makes sense, right?
Sure.
I mean, it's in the name there, high availability. So we want to make sure that's available as much as possible. And really what we're talking about is an agreement between us and the provider, right? I want them to give me some kind of agreement of how much availability they're going to give me. I'm paying for this resource, right? And I want to make sure that I'm getting what I pay for. And if that doesn't happen, there's going to be clauses in there of how we can fix the situation or what we can do in case we don't provide the availability that we agreed upon. So that's really what high availability is. If we wanted a strict definition, a characteristic of a system that aims to ensure an agreed level of operational performance, usually uptime, for a higher than normal period.
Okay.
Fancy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So really, what does that mean to us? Again, the idea is that I want my resources to be available. And we're going to talk about how Azure provides high availability. Right now, we just want to focus on, again, what it is. Yes.
Yeah, because when you were saying, okay, by that definition that you just gave us, it seems a little objective, like, well, what seems acceptable to me may not be acceptable to you. So.
Right. Absolutely. And different organizations have different needs, different requirements. If I'm a small business that's maintaining a server that maybe stores files for my employees, and if that goes down, they can't get to those files, but they can maybe still do their work or do something else. Whereas if this server is my front end of my website, and I'm an organization like Amazon, that sells, any downtime can cost me a lot of money. So different needs when it comes to high availability. So
wouldn't that be something if Amazon's website was hosted on Azure?
I know, right? I think
Just
it
say
is.
it.
No, just kidding. All right. So, again, high availability, measure of uptime, typically done in percentages. And we'll use something known as an SLA, and I'll come back to this, a service level agreement, to denote what my availability percentage is and what I'm willing to pay for that. Let's take a look at my screen. When we talk about high availability, as I said, it's typically measured in percentages of uptime. So what percentage of time is that resource going to be available? And this is a chart. I think I picked this up from Wikipedia, and you don't have to memorize any of these facts, right? I'm just using it as an example so that you would understand, what do they mean by 99% uptime? What's the difference between, say, 99% uptime and 99.99% uptime? And we'll also use terms like 2 nines, 3 nines, 4 nines to represent this, because it's a lot easier than saying 99.99999% uptime.
Yes.
Wait, how many nines did you say?
I know, and I've even been making slides before, and I'm counting them out to make sure I have the correct number, because even on the Azure platform, we go up to currently up to 12 nines. So even exceeding that chart there, that could be quite a lot to have to say each time.
And we were talking about that before the show. That is crazy to think about 11 or 12 nines, right? When we look at this chart here, let's take a look at something. A common uptime or a high availability agreement might be 99.99, and that's actually very impressive uptime, at least when we think about the physical world, right? When we think about our old school on-premises applications and services, if I could say I could get 3 nines, I was happy. Right? The ability to say, I'm going to get 4 nines or 5 nines, that's really impressive. And what it comes down to, let's say 4 nines, right? And you can see downtime per year.
Less than an hour.
Yeah, 52 minutes, right? Downtime per month, 4.38 minutes. Downtime per week, 1 minute. That's 8 seconds, 8.5 seconds per day. Now, when you get up to, say, 9 nines, that very bottom row there, 31 milliseconds a year. I mean, think about that. Milliseconds. It's one of those concepts that's really hard for humans to grasp. 31 milliseconds is a blink of an eye, right? I mean, and to be able to say that, hey, your service is going to be available 365 days minus one eye blink. That's impressive. But also keep in mind that there's a price difference, right, between 99.99 and 99.999999999. There's going to be quite a difference in price. And really, you know, some of these things might be negotiable. A lot of them just come with, right? When you look at Microsoft, in fact, let's jump over here to the next slide. When we talk about a service level agreement, this is where we're agreeing to that high availability or that uptime. And it's usually, again, denoted in a time available, and there's usually some kind of monetary fee associated with it. I don't know if fee is the right word. It could be
Commitment.
What's that?
A monetary commit.
A commitment, yeah, where, okay, if we don't provide, we're going to agree to 99.99 uptime. And if we exceed that, if the downtime exceeds what's allotted, then maybe we'll give you money back.
Credit.
Or give you a credit, right? Mm-hmm. Or some way repay you because we weren't able to meet our agreement, right? And so that's something you work out with these cloud providers.
You got to read the fine print.
You got to read the fine print because it's not always, as we were talking earlier, it's not always as cut and dry like, all right, we'll give you back this amount of money. It might be, oh, we'll credit your account. We'll allow you to purchase other services at a reduced price, you know, things like that.
Right.
So you do have to read the fine print. Speaking of fine print, I do have a link in the show notes for you guys. It'll take you out to Microsoft.com. They've got a summary of all of their SLAs for Azure. And again, don't worry about memorizing any of this for the exam other than understanding the concepts of high availability, the concept of SLA, at least at this point. Now, in future episodes, we might talk about specifically some of the SLAs. But when you look at things like Azure Active Directory, we guarantee at least 99.9 availability. So they're going to give you 3 nines for that. If we scroll down, I'll have to zoom out here on my Zoom It tool to something else. Let's find one that's a little different. Here, API management, guarantee 99.95. When we look at, say, automation, and we're looking at 3 nines. And again, like I said, there's Azure Front Door, gives you 99.99, so 4 nines for that front door service. Actually, just saw something on the Azure website about the availability. You can check on the status of services. Front Door had an issue not that long ago where they rolled some new feature Front Door out. It caused a problem. They had to roll it back. But you can I guarantee a lot of businesses were now looking at their SLAs going, wait a second, how fast did you get it rolled back? How fast did you get it back up? And did that affect did you violate the SLA? But anyway, that is another topic. So I just wanted you to guys, I'll give you again that link to the SLAs if you were curious to see what kind of SLAs they provide for Microsoft. But at this point, understand that concept. High availability is trying to provide that uptime. An SLA is an agreement between you and the provider of what kind of uptime they are going to guarantee you, and then what is going to happen if they fail to meet that.
Okay.
So just in general there.
Now, Mike, I know we, in the past, you know, when you were taking a look at and you said, 3 nines is good for our on-prem or older type of configuration there. So what types of troubles or obstacles do we see here in the cloud? Is it going to be the same, different, a combo?
Very similar. You know, the advantage that the cloud has, obviously, are resources and a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about in upcoming episodes of ways to provide you with that high availability. It's easy for them to, well, I say easy, it's easy for us to purchase these services and do things like availability sets and scale sets and redundancy across regions and things like that they've already got the infrastructure there. For me to try to provide that in an on-premises environment was going to be extremely expensive, extremely resource intensive, trying to set up a hot site on the other side of the country. So if something happens over here, my resources are still available is extremely expensive for me, right? As a small organization, probably impossible. But if I move to the cloud, I can take advantage of the fact that they've already got data centers that are geographically separated that I can use to provide that level of redundancy and give me that level of high availability. All right. Now, something else we do want to talk about here, and again, don't worry too hard about the math involved with this. Just understand the concept. We just saw that summary of SLAs from Azure. When we think about a solution that we move out into Azure, we have to realize that there are going to be different components involved in that solution. For example, what I've got on the screen here, I've got a web application. But that web application relies on a SQL database in the back end. And there's even more to it that I haven't put on this slide, like the network that's connecting that web app with that SQL database, like the load balancer that's sitting in front of my web app to provide the ability to scale this out, right? Each one of those components has its own SLA. That was that summary that I was just showing you. So now what happens to my solution as a whole when I look at my availability, my uptime, right? We have to think about something known as a compound SLA. For example, my web app, according to Azure, if you look at their SLAs, has a 99.95% uptime, or that's their SLA agreement, right? SQL database on the back end has a 99.99% uptime or availability guarantee with that SLA. So if I have a solution that's using both of these, what I need to be worried about is what is my uptime, what's my availability for the entire solution? Because it's great that SQL has a 99.99% uptime, but if my web app isn't available, then does it really matter if my SQL database is available?
No.
Right, because nobody can get to the web app to get to the data, so it doesn't really matter. So really have to look at it as a whole, and it works out slightly differently than you might think at first. When we start multiplying these, because that's what we're going to do, we're going to multiply these SLAs together, and when we start multiplying them, it actually reduces the overall SLA. You might think that if I take a web service that has a 99.95% uptime and combine that with a SQL database that has a 99.99% uptime, my new uptime for the whole thing should be somewhere in the middle, but it's not. It's actually going to be lower, which makes sense. The more components involved in my solution, the more possibility that one of those components is going to fail.
Of failure. Yeah.
Exactly, which is going to bring down the overall availability for my entire solution. So when you multiply those two numbers together, you actually get 99.94% uptime, right? So that is going to be what's known as a compound SLA. Again, something you need to consider when you're moving out to the cloud. Is that acceptable, right, for my application? And if not, what can we do about it? Because there's definitely things we can use in Azure to increase those uptimes. All right, so common availability issues. We want to take a minute and think about, okay, well, we know what high availability is. I want to make sure that this resource, this application, this data, whatever the case may be, I want to make sure that's available as much as possible, 99.99% of the time, for example. Well, what are reasons that it wouldn't be available? I mean, I just put it out there in the cloud. Shouldn't it be available all the time, 100%? Not necessarily, right? There are a lot of factors.
But yes.
Yeah.
We were just you were explaining some of those to us. So.
Some of the things that can go wrong, right? So some of the things that can have, and what I've done here is just kind of tried to give us this big picture. I've got a user sitting out there on the left. They're connecting to the internet, my little globe, and then they're connecting into an Azure network. So I've published a web application. So I've got that front end subnet. I've got that back end subnet that's hosting the SQL database. So all of this is maybe my web presence, my store where people can buy my product, right? So what are some things that can go wrong that can affect that availability? All right, network failures, right? And network failures, a common reason if my users can't connect, if the internet, is unavailable, if that connection to Azure itself is unavailable, then my web app is unavailable. So network failures are a common cause of availability issues.
And that could come from just outages or maybe a backhoe near a construction site, literally cutting the connection to your facility. So a lot of different variables there.
Absolutely. And it's not just where you might think right out there on the front end, but what about that connection between my load balancer and my front end, or that connection between my front end and my back end, right? So each one of these networks poses a potential risk of something that could fail and cause my application or my data to be unavailable, right? Application failures. Right? If the web app itself, if the front end to my store fails for some reason, it's another availability issue. What about the system that's hosting that application? If it fails, then obviously I cannot access the application. That'd be another availability issue.
because somewhere that, whether it be a virtual machine, it's running on physical hardware somewhere. And as we know, physical mechanical moving parts, eventually they wear out and they fail.
They do, right? And so that's going to cause a problem. Again, all the other components are working fine, but that one component has failed, my application is not available, right? And we've kind of talked about this dependent system failure, something that we have to think about, because it's easy to focus on that web front end and, hey, my website is up, but that website relies on a lot of other systems to provide that interface and to retrieve that data, show that catalog, pull those product descriptions, look up the current price, give them the ability to order that, right? We've got order entry software, a lot of business logic that has to go on, and a lot of that takes place on other systems, not on the web server itself, right? And so if any one of those components fails, then my application is unavailable. Again, another reason that we can have availability issues. Right? Power failure. The whole place goes dark. It just disappeared, right? It's no longer there. Obviously, this would be an availability issue, because if the data center, or if my physical presence is no longer available, then my application is not available. So at this point, again, we're going to talk about some specific solutions as we move through this course to how Azure handles this. But I want to just think about, moving to the cloud in general. What is the benefit? What do I get from that? I've looked at these availability issues. You're trying to convince me to move my data off my on-premises location into the cloud. Why? Right? Well, because of what the cloud provides. Think about the networking failures, right? If it's an on-premises network, I've got all these issues where I could have network connectivity. My ISP fails, customers can no longer reach my website. Or my switch in my rack fails, I can no longer connect the front end to the back end, right? Now, I hopefully have equipment set aside for this purpose, and I can swap it out. It takes time, effort, and money and resources sitting there waiting for if and when a failure occurs. Or we can move out to the cloud, right? And we can basically let them worry about it. People like Microsoft and Azure, they've spent a lot of money providing redundancy for their network to be able to guarantee those SLAs, to give us that uptime that we're looking for. So by moving to the cloud, I can take advantage of their investment in the networking and the redundancy that they've built in to the networks, right? And this is just again, this screenshot, it's no important information on here. I just want to show you the kind of architecture that you're looking at when you move into the cloud and you look at Azure and you look at the redundancy that they've got built into here, right? There are no single points of failure in a configuration like this, right? I couldn't afford to do this in my small shop.
No.
Right? But I can move out to Azure and I can take advantage of the fact that they can afford it.
Yes.
Right? That's the idea here. When it comes to application failure, we talked about all the different reasons for availability issues, common availability issues. How does moving to the cloud help me? With applications, well, we can run that application on a virtual machine here, on a physical machine here, or I can move it out to the cloud. What do I get? What benefits do I get from moving out to the cloud? The ability to monitor the applications. Azure and most cloud providers are going to give you the ability to monitor the application, to look at the traffic flowing in and out of it, to be able to spot any kind of issues quickly and then do something about it, right? I threw a link in here just to show you guys, and again, in future episodes, we'll come back and talk about some of this stuff, but you look at let me see if I can find thought I had a screenshot of it, but the amount of data that you can pull back, the dashboards that they're going to give you, the metrics that you're going to be able to see with that application, much more than anything that I could implement here in-house, right, relatively inexpensively. They already have all that built in. All I have to do is I'm sure pay for it, but you get a dashboard like this that shows you unique sessions and users, failed requests, server response times, server exceptions, dependency failures, all of this information at your fingertips, if I can say that.
And not having to implement multiple separate systems for management purposes is all right there contained in centralized management. And that's so important if you've ever had to log into different systems and check on different services and so forth.
Right, and configuring those and making sure those are working properly. Man, by moving out to the cloud, I can act like a big fish, because even though I'm a small organization, I've got the tools at my fingertips to act like this big, huge organization. Really good stuff. Other things, power. We talked about that being a common availability issue, right? We live in, our data center or our on-premise location is in Gainesville, Florida. We have things like hurricanes that come through. We have power issues that can be associated with that. We've got heat waves. We've got AC issues, right? If power fails, AC goes out, servers get awfully toasty in there, right? And guess what the cloud has? Redundancy for all of that. They've got built-in redundancy. They've got typically half of them have their own, power generating capabilities, whether those are batteries, whether those are like Azure. Now, I think we just got back from Azure from Microsoft Ignite, talking about how 50% of their power comes from renewable resources.
Self-generated renewable resources. Yeah.
Yeah. So they've got that ability to provide that power, even if the local power company goes offline, they can still provide that power, right? I can't do that here on my on-premises location. I don't have the resources to have a huge generator sitting out back or wind turbines up on my roof or anything like that.
Yeah, a lot of these auxiliary services are just thought about from the onset and designed into the Azure infrastructure, the entire huge infrastructure that they have.
Exactly. Again, taking advantage of what they have in place and their investment that they've made already. And the same thing would apply to our Reliant systems, right? The ability to monitor those back-end servers and know when something is going wrong or one of those systems is having an issue that could potentially give me an availability issue. So these are some of the benefits we're going to see by moving out to the cloud.
All right, Mike, so you've told us about some of the problems that we could have. You explained, how we can overcome those, but I have a feeling that throughout this entire series, we're going to be talking about that quite a bit, right?
I think so.
All right, so for now, we're going to go ahead and sign out. I've been your host, Cherokee Boost.
And I'm Mike Roderick.
See you next time.
Thank you for watching ITProTV.